By now, we know that Foucault's theory on docile bodies intends to be a way to examine a labor force and also to keep a check on that labor force. So Foucault makes it clear that there is a distinction between the kind of domination of the bodies under a disciplinary power structure and slavery. So the bodies, he says, are inducted into a system where they have to give up some rights in exchange for the right to work, and also to develop their skills. These processes, he says, exhibit the modalities of power which have been developed within the workhouses, schools, monasteries, religious orders, other structures for centuries, and have always a particular adopted according to a particular need, with the motive to expedite the growth of military power or to allow an increase in the industrial productivity. He further moves, from the disciplinary mechanism, and he articulates another idea of panopticism, through which he says that the individuals can be controlled, and specifically when we talk about the prisons. He says that this is again an enclosed, segmented space which is observed at every point in which the individual is inserted in a fixed place. So the slightest movements are supervised, recorded, in which an uninterrupted work of writing links the center and the periphery. So this power is exercised without division according to a continuous hierarchical figure in which the individual is constantly located, examined, and distributed among the living beings. And this, he says, constitutes a compact model of the disciplinary mechanism. Again, furthermore, he says that this kind of disciplinary mechanism is also a kind of a political dream. So there are two sorts of dreams, he says. One is of a pure community and the other one is of a disciplined society. And in order to discipline the society further, he says, one way is that you're conditioning them to a routine, exercise, examination pattern. And the other way of controlling them is by surveillance, observation, and also recording the minute details of the bodies. So the historic panoptic model that he uses is of Jeremy Bentham. He says it is founded on the disciplinary concept of an enclosure, and it keeps the society's less desirable elements enclosed and out of the public view to make them the same elements feel disparate. So this is a kind of a partitioning, and he begins the chapter Panopticism by observations on spatial partitioning during plague. He also talks about the exclusion of the lepers. So he says they are like partitioned off, forming groups. And also he talks about the psychological and architectural control. So he says the aim of this kind of partitioning is to establish the presences and absences, to know where and how to locate the individuals, and to set up useful communications, to interrupt others, to be able at each moment to supervise the conduct of each individual. So he draws as in this kind of a model from Bentham's idea of an all-seeing eye of God, that the perfect disciplinary apparatus would be able to see everything constantly with a singular gaze. So the perfect panoptic structure would have a central point, it would have a source of light illuminating everything, and a locus of convergence for everything that must be known. A perfect eye that nothing would escape, and a center towards which all gazes would be turned, ensuring that those within the Panopticon would always be made intimately aware of the fact that they were under observation and the system had power over them. So again, this is in furtherance with the concept of discipline only. Earlier, we learned about the docile bodies, and now he talks about this kind of panopticism, which he says is very, very essential for the fact that it has a great project, whether it is individualizing the disciplines or imposing discipline on the excluded bodies. And he says that this kind of panoptic mechanism arranges for spatial unities that make it possible to see constantly and to recognize immediately. So he talks about Bentham's Panopticon, and he says it reverses the principle of dungeon, or rather of its three functions: to enclose, to deprive of light, and to hide. It preserves only the first and eliminates the other two. So full lighting and the eye of a supervisor capture better than darkness, which ultimately protects. So visibility is a trap, and again, all that is central to the panopticon is visibility. We see how that object is being seen and the information about that object is being collected, and this has several benefits, which he says that every kind of organization or any kind of body which seeks some kind of a reformation can keep a record of the activity by constant gaze. So visibility here, is one of the most important elements. If we talk about the prison, now he says the inmate will constantly have before his eyes a tall outline of a central tower from which he is spied upon. But the inmate must never know whether he is being looked at any one moment, but he must be sure that he may always be so. So when he's envisaging Jeremy Bentham's Panopticon, he says this is one way in which a person can be controlled, because the person, the inmate, the prisoner probably is thinking that he is constantly under the gaze of a supervisor and inspector. Therefore, he has to behave in a proper manner. So the Panopticon is a marvelous machine, which is again, whatever one may wish to put it to, produces a homogeneous effect of power. And it is again that the subjects in this Panopticon are again like, in a machine, who are dissociated from seeing, but again, they are being seen all the time. I hope you understand this point. You must further read the text, to get a better understanding of this. So he says that the Panopticon is again individual distribution, which again wants to normalize the behavior of the persons. The Panopticon is a privileged place for the experiments on men and for analyzing with complete certainty the transformations that may be obtained from them. So Panopticon was much like a laboratory. It could be used as a machine to carry out experiments, to alter behavior, to train or correct the individuals. So because now why? Because all this is mapping the attitudes and behavior of the inmate. So Panopticon again must not be understood as a dream building. It is a diagram of a mechanism of power reduced to its ideal forms. Its functioning, abstracted from an obstacle, resistance or friction, must be represented as pure architectural and optical system. It is, in fact, a figure of political technology. This is what he writes in this chapter, that may and must be detached from any specific use. I quote, he writes, it is polyvalent in its applications. It serves to reform prisoners, but also to treat patients, to instruct school children, to confine the insane, to supervise workers, to put beggars and idlers to work. It is a type of location of bodies in space, of distribution of individuals in relation to one another, of hierarchical organization, of disposition of centers and channels of power, of definition of the instruments and modes of intervention of power, which can be implemented in hospitals, workshops, schools, and prisons. So he says, whenever one is dealing with a multiplicity of individuals on whom a task or particular form of behavior must be imposed, the panoptic schema may be used. So this is, he says, the benefit of this kind of a panopticon. And again, the added advantage is that there is no physical torture that is accompanying all this kind of panoptic schema. It is merely the architecture, geometry, and the gaze that is working, which has direct control over the mind of the inmates. The panoptic schema makes any apparatus of power more intense. He says it assures economy, it assures efficacy, and is preventive in character, and it is a continuous functioning, and this kind of functioning again, will be directly proportional to the surplus power and the surplus production. I hope you remember the productive utility factor that we had already studied when we were talking about the docile bodies. So he says panopticon opens up, this is what is from the preface of Bentham's Panopticon, with a list of benefits that can be obtained from the inspection houses. He says morals can be reformed, health can be preserved, industry can be invigorated, instruction diffused, and public burdens can be lightened. So the panoptica schema, without disappearing as such or losing any of its property, was destined to spread out throughout the social body, and its vocation was to become a journalized function. So whether it was functioning in a plague-stricken town, or it was functioning in the hospitals or any kind of institutions, it was rearranging, and no doubt the power there again is quite evident. So this panopticon also is a way in which power functions. So Panopticism is the general principle of a new political anatomy whose object and are not the relations of sovereignty, but the relations of discipline. So I hope you do understand how there is an interconnection between all these key concepts of Michel Foucault, whether it is discipline, docile bodies, panopticon, or the disciplinary mechanism. So he says this is what? This is only an extension of those disciplinary institutions. And I hope you remember that Foucault, while discussing all this, one time he's talking about the army, or he's talking about the hospitals, or he's talking about the plague-stricken areas, or he's talking about the times of the monarch. What is he trying to show? He's trying to bring out the effect of this kind of a disciplinary mechanism in the process of correction and reformation of the prisoners as well. So his work interweaves ideas, institutions, and governance, how this power is operating in these particular organizations through several disciplinary procedures and mechanisms, which no doubt, are turning into centers of observations or observatories, and are changing men into effective machines or subordinated cogs, but ultimately have the goal to increase the productivity of the unit wherever it is operational, and also to bring about some kind of progress in the society and civilization. So why we need to talk about all this even in the 21st century is because we already know that we are into the times of surveillance, and whether it is in the form of the social networking sites or some other means of observing the behavior or gathering the personal details of a person, we know that in one way or the other, the bodies are being disciplined and are being controlled through this kind of panopticism. So the overall methods already explained earlier, the timetables, the collective training, exercises, detailed surveillance, even of the minute detail, which is very, very important for this kind of um, knowledge about the bodies. So the disciplines, this also leads not only to the disciplining of the bodies and some kind of, say, improvement, whether it is in medicine, psychiatry, child psychology, educational psychology, or rationalization of the labor at large. This is extending to the development of the society, whether agronomical, industrial, or economic. So he therefore, is of the opinion that the 18th century invented the techniques of discipline and examination, and the Middle Ages invented the judicial investigation. But later now we have this kind of the empirical knowledge and this kind of panopticism through which we have the knowledge, and also this knowledge has to be used again as a means for correction when we talk about the prisoners in a prison.